On Christian Newsmakers, we are talking about Turning Point USA. This is the organization Charlie Kirk founded. Josh Thifault was born and raised a Hoosier, and now he's the senior director at Turning Point USA. Josh, thanks so much for joining me here on WTHR+.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. So Indiana Governor Mike Braun has now called on all schools and universities here in Indiana to take all necessary steps to facilitate student organizations like Turning Point USA that foster the values of liberty and freedom of speech in the next generation of Hoosiers. So why did Turning Point USA want to see this happen here in the Hoosier State?
So here's why state partnerships like this, especially ones that are done so defiantly and definitively like Governor Braun this morning, here's why they're a big deal. The number one thing that has slowed down the growth of Turning Point USA since Charlie founded it in 2012 was pushback against the First Amendment rights of our students. It was normal for our chapters to be denied. It was normal for us to be kicked off campus. It was normal to take oftentimes 1, 2, 3 years to gain registered student organization status at high schools and colleges in not so friendly areas, even within red states. So when you look at what happened after Charlie was martyred, we had over 70,000 requests to start and join chapters across the country. So we thought, what can we do to create the best possible environment for these students to quickly assemble and turn that interest into actual real student infrastructure? And the best thing possible there is for states to stand up and assert that they will protect the First Amendment rights of those students. That's a big deal for two things. Number one, it gives the students the air cover to understand that they will not be discriminated against maybe for their future career, for their grades today. And it also helps in a secondary way. It makes it much easier for us to attract staff sponsors. We don't charter a chapter. We don't grant a charter for a chapter until there's a staff sponsor, a professor, a teacher, a football coach. And in the more blue areas of the country, especially a lot of the big cities, it's very difficult to do that because those people do not want the professional retaliation that comes from signing on to the Club America chapter or the Turning Point College chapter. So when a state fearlessly stands up, like you saw this morning, it completely changes the culture. It makes that football coach feel like he can do that without risk. It makes students think, okay, this is something I can do without risking my college acceptance or my grades here senior year.
So Josh, as you mentioned today, Indiana becomes the 8th state in the country partnering with Turning Point USA, joining Arkansas, Nebraska, Florida, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas, and Montana. So what do you say to the critics of Turning Point USA who don't want to see chapters of your organization on schools or college campuses?
I would ask them what kind of country they want to live in. You look at what Turning Point USA stands for. We are a apple pie and vanilla ice cream Americana organization. We encourage kids to not drink and not do drugs and work hard and make something of themselves, get married young, have lots of kids, follow Jesus, know the founding of the country, follow the Constitution, understand capitalism. The result of that, whether you're on the left or the right, is a generation of students who contribute to society. You look at a lot of the issues the left rails about, especially the entitlement programs, how they believe that the safety net nationwide and statewide should be bigger to help those who are less fortunate. There's not going to be that many people who are less fortunate in a generation where most people have a place, where most of those kids are married, where most of those kids are following God, where most of those kids are working hard. Turning Point USA is the best organization in the country to fix the brokenness that has hurt several generations of America's youth. We're finally turning around American culture. So if that's not the country you want to live in, I mean, feel free to leave, because that sounds like a pretty great country to me.
So Josh, in this news conference with the governor, you talked about the renaissance that you were seeing among Gen Z. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'll specifically talk about one thing I'm seeing with young men. So young men were very fired up politically last year, but we didn't really know how that was going to translate culturally and spiritually. We knew that they loved Trump. I mean, how could you not? If you can't convince a 21, 22-year-old red-blooded American male to vote for a man who was shot and then stood up and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight," then we should all go home. That's not that tough to do. But Charlie was obsessed with the idea of bringing eternal truth to the table, not just those quick hit political one-liners that may get them out to vote last November. And we saw that begin after the election. Charlie was largely responsible. A lot of other Christian leaders were largely responsible. There was a surge in interest in the gospel of Jesus Christ amongst young men and young women. And it still felt like, I wish that it felt like something was missing. Like we weren't doing it quick enough, but we were fighting and we were pushing and we were praying. And that spiritual renaissance began in response to Charlie's martyrdom. And it wasn't just that Charlie died. It wasn't just that he was the second most famous person on social media in the entire world the day that he died. It was the way he did. It was that minutes before he died, he was literally sharing the gospel. And for the whole youth culture in America to share that trauma, to watch that video that a lot of us watched and wish we could unwatch, where he died fighting for those First Amendment rights we believe in, when he died stating the things that a lot of us believe, some of us quietly, some of us outspokenly, that Jesus is God, that he died on the cross for our sins, he rose again from the grave, that heaven is real, that hell is real, that if we confess with our mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we'll be saved, that America is fundamentally a good country, that capitalism is a system that rewards those who work hard. These are values that most of your listeners care about and understand. And there was something that clicked in the minds of so many young Americans who were interested in the things of the faith, but they really liked going out to the bars. They were interested in the things of the faith, but they didn't really want to do the work to read their Bible every day and figure out what all this Christianity stuff was about. And that surge of not just interest, but Gen Z students who were surrendering their life to Jesus began. And it's continuing. There's a lot of work that must continue, but I'm optimistic about the future. And it's interesting how this plays out politically. The left's in a horrific spot especially with young men, but also with young women. We had a tough time attracting young women to Turning Point events for over a decade. And now all of a sudden, Kirk is their champion. They absolutely love her. You look at a lot of the other stars of the movement, like Alex Clark, who we saw this morning. Really, if we can solidify our gains with young men, and if we can clearly communicate biblical truth to young men, which we got some plans to do that, we'll be in a really solid spot long term. And of course, I love the conservative movement being in a strong place, but what I care a lot more about is the eternal destiny of these kids. I love living in a country where we're safe and we're prosperous, and the values that we were founded on are followed and adhered to. And at the end of the day, what matters more than that? I mean, where are we going to spend eternity? Heaven is real, hell is real. And this is something I've talked about on campus here and there throughout my career at Turning Point. And it seems like students didn't really care until the last 5-6 months. They seem to care now.
Josh, you are unique in the relationship that you had with Charlie Kirk. You're a Hoosier who worked alongside Charlie for years. You played basketball together. You were friends with him. Tell me about the man, Charlie Kirk, and who he was to you.
So the untold story of Charlie Kirk was, yes, he was a savant. He was brilliant. He was one of the most impressive people I've ever met. But most of who he became was because of his obedience to God and his extraordinary discipline. When I met him, we were both kind of super jocks. We loved sports. That's what we talked about. We would play basketball together. That's how we really connected back when I met him in 2014 after he started Turning Point. And he was a good debater, but he was not the best debater in the world. He read a lot of books and he was smart, and he was writing his first book and his second book, but he wasn't up there with the heavyweights yet. And a lot of people think that he was just born the most impressive man in my generation. I watched him work 90, 100, 110-hour weeks, quite literally for 10, 11, 12 years. And he was very serious about keeping the Sabbath, so he would do that and spend time with his wife and his kids. But the other 6 days, he packed his schedule more than I've seen anyone in my entire life. He was as busy as a president. And he did that on purpose. He felt a sense of urgency. He felt like his time here was finite. And I'm not saying that he knew that everything would happen like it did last year. But even if he lived 80 years, his time here was finite, and he took that seriously. He took seriously that the Bible says that our life here is a breath. And our relationship was kind of funny because I would push him to kind of chill a little bit, like, hey, we don't have to go so hard. What if we go 9 out of 10 this week? And then he would do the opposite for me. He'd be like, oh, no, we got to do this. And this happened. Like, we're going 11 out of 10. And I need you to come to Wisconsin with me, then Arizona. So that was kind of the tug and pull. And that's why we were such great friends. I miss him a lot. It's still tough for me to talk about that stuff today.
Josh, how has your Christian faith been impacted by Charlie's assassination?
So I've been a Christian since I was 4 years old. And in a lot of my areas, I lived sold out for Jesus, but there was one thing I was holding back. And that one thing was my privacy. On purpose, I pulled behind the scenes 7, 8 years ago. I was friends with a lot of the people who have become the famous icons of the movement, and they needed security, and it just didn't seem like the life I wanted for my future family. I was about to get married to this beautiful woman, and I didn't want that. And something clicked right when everything happened on 9/10, and it's like I felt that I was called to the front lines, that I didn't get to design my life anymore, and that my job was to declare the truth no matter the cost. And praise God, that's the same message he gave my wife. And I'm not unique in this. There are similar stories all over the country, all over the world, of people who realized that there was part of their life that they were kind of saving for themselves. They were focusing on what they wanted and not focusing on how God wanted to use them. So since then, I mean, I've just been sprinting out of the gate, speaking on high school and college campuses. And I don't know how many years God's going to give me. Maybe He's going to give me another year. Maybe He's going to give me another 50. But I'm going to tell everyone I can about Jesus. And I am thrilled to see the direction that Gen Z is going. It's so different than the early days of Turning Point. The early days of Turning Point, it was so discouraging and so difficult. And we would show up on campus and people would make fun of us and flip over our tables and flip us off and yell at us. And we would just obey God and go back anyway. And now it's the cool thing to do. Now is when it's fun. Now is when, dare I say, it feels easy, but we need to show up if we expect to win.
You've talked in the past about how God has worked since Charlie died. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, one thing I have to mention is the courage of Erica Kirk. So what a lot of people don't understand is that Charlie was so extraordinarily busy. He focused a lot of his time on his show, a lot of his time on speaking around the country. He really believed in the importance of speaking face to face, especially with young men and women, and he knew that was important. So when Erica took over a few days after he died, it wasn't a traditional CEO takeover situation. A lot of people were confused. How's a grieving widow doing this? Her job was to assert and maintain control of this extraordinarily large organization, where a lot of the people directly under the CEO, like me, I mean, we're doing our thing, and Charlie would cast vision for us, and he'd be there for us. But Turning Point USA is the largest Christian conservative organization in American history by a lot. And not only that, we're doubling all of our infrastructure in 2026 to meet this extraordinary student demand. Watching God work in her heart, in her heart, and leading her to step up days after he died, so that this enormous tanker that is the Turning Point movement stayed in the right direction. And this was as we were focusing more and more on issues of faith. Not that we're forgetting about the politics, but as you can tell, that's something we focus on a lot now more than ever. Her taking over assured that we would keep going in the direction Charlie planned for us to go. And another way God worked is we had our first ever super high level board investor executive retreat where we talked about a multi-year vision for the company all together in one place a few weeks before he died. And Charlie pretty much gave us a 5-year plan of what he thought we should do. And we followed a lot of it so far. It's going very well. We'll trust God to show us what to do as things unfold and as the situations change. But I mean, as you well know, having that meeting a few weeks before he's assassinated is extraordinary. That's why you saw meteoric growth, because Erica stepped up and because we had a very important long-term vision meeting a few weeks before he was taken.
Yeah. And you've seen this enormous impact that Charlie had on the country at his memorial service. Thousands of people showing up there. When Turning Point came to IU Bloomington on the campus, big crowds everywhere you go. So are you seeing this impact of Charlie's life on the country?
I certainly am, and I have to tell you a little fact a lot of people don't know. Almost 300,000 people showed up to the memorial. The only way we could count was we bought the cell phone ping geodata around the arena so that we could figure out how many people were outside. So it was just under 300,000. So assuming that there were some kids there without phones, it was probably a little over 300,000. And it shows the spiritual impact Charlie had. If Charlie had not focused so much on his faith and on the gospel, especially the last year of his life, then you could have seen everything framed very differently. It could have been all about political violence. It could have been a rallying cry for the midterms, and it was something so much bigger. Also, because Erica forgave the killer. Erica forgiving the killer at the memorial completely changed the tone of everything that happened there. Nobody remembered any political statements that were made, and that was the front page all over the world because that is Christian faith in its essence. That is who Jesus was. And it's easy to talk about Christian faith, and it's much harder to live it out in a situation like that. And here's why it landed so well with Gen Z. So Gen Z, a lot of them, I'm making a bit of a generalization, they don't trust the institution of the church. There are millions of Gen Z Americans who are curious about the things of God. Many of them even read their Bible, but they don't trust the institution of the church. And a lot of them, it's because they had a bad experience with the church. I've heard some version of this story over and over again. I was in college, I was drinking too much, trying to get my life together, and I thought maybe I should go to church. So I went to some youth group ministry on campus, and I show up, and it's this week TED Talk, and there's a rainbow flag, and I leave, and I'm like, hey, well, I guess that didn't help me at all. And because of all of those negative experiences with, let's be honest, fake churches that aren't really preaching the Bible, there are a lot of young Americans who are looking for answers. They want to know who Jesus is, and they don't trust the institution of the church. And that's why Turning Point USA has been so effective reaching them, because we're not a church. We're a massive Christian conservative organization trying to get on their Instagram and get on their TikTok and tell them about Jesus and tell them about the values they should build their life on. And that's the unique place God has put us in. And praise God, we're stronger than ever because this could have been a very different story over the last 6 months.
Yeah, thank you for telling us about that. A couple more questions for you, Josh. Indiana, as you mentioned today, is the first state in the country to partner with Vote.online operation. Tell me a little bit about that and how that will work.
So I'm thrilled that you guys wanted to do this really before we pushed it. So what I really wanted to do after we set up all these state partnerships and fueled our chapter growth and protected our kids was to go back to all the states and say we would love to partner with you so we can be your official voter registration outlet for these high school and college students, which is going to be much harder now because the leftist groups who used to provide these services for free are going to start pulling out one by one as the numbers come back and they realize that most of these Gen Z students are leaning conservative and not liberal. So we are more than welcome to fill in that gap, make it very easy for students on the left and students on the right to register to vote. We love that because if they're a student on the left, it gives us a chance to at least talk to them and get to know them and understand what they believe and hopefully win them over with our ideas. So I'm thrilled that Indiana is leading the charge there. Vote.online is one of the most important things Turning Point has ever been involved with. It's technically a partner organization with us, but I'm elated. It should be very easy for young people to register to vote, and it should be valued in society. It should be cool. It should not be something that we have to scratch and claw and fight to get people to do. And we have a chance to, starting with Gen Z, build a culture in America where if you want to be part of the country, if you want the right to complain, you at least need to vote. That's what I tell people. So you want to complain about what's going on, like did you vote? At least start there. Then I'll let you complain to me.
Josh, as of today in our taping, how many chapters do you have at high schools and colleges across the U.S.?
High schools, we have over 3,300. Colleges, we have over 1,300. So not quite the 20,000 number Charlie cast as our long-term goal a few weeks before he passed. But it does make us the largest chapter-based student organization in America. We have a lot more work to do. And I expect Indiana's numbers will double and triple as we move forward here because of this morning.
And what is the future with Turning Point USA? What was part of Charlie's dream for the next year and then the next 5 years?
So his big dream was that instead of just playing in culture, we would take it over. Not by dominating in such a way that we don't allow other viewpoints, but dominating in such a way that we bring real eternal truth to the table at every school in the country, and it becomes wildly popular because that's what kids really want when it shows up. When you look at the left versus right divide in youth culture, we win almost all the time when we actually show up. We have a showing up problem. So his dream was to have a presence he wanted one on every high school and college in America. We settled on 20,000, which would be about 2/3 of them in all 50 states. That is Charlie's big dream. And his dream is not that we just win elections, although that's very important. I value that a lot. His dream is that we have a nation where most people follow Jesus again. And you look at the political problems and the cultural problems that we have, those flow down from the fact that most people in our country, they don't have a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. And when you have that, everything changes. When you have that, everything changes. It makes you a better spouse. It makes you a better father. It makes you a better mother. It makes you a better worker. It makes you a better boss. It makes you healthier. There's a reason why we have so many problems in this country, why we have mental health crises in this country, why we have addiction problems in this country. It's because most people don't have Jesus. If I didn't have Jesus, I'd probably be mired in all that stuff too. So that was his long-term dream, and now it's me and Erica's.
We've been talking with Josh Thifault of Turning Point USA, a Hoosier doing spectacular work for this organization. Thanks so much for joining us here on Christian Newsmakers on WTHR+. Josh, I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. Thank you for having me.
You bet.